Good evening, and welcome to Nevada County Interviews. I'm your host, Paul Minicucci, and this is part two of a two-part series we're doing on Sierra writers, where we have some of our local writers reading. In part one, Babette Donaldson, who's with me, and Chuck Jaffe. Babette and I read in the first part, so you need to go back and make sure you see that first segment if you haven't seen it. And in this segment, Chuck Jaffe is going to read from some of his poetry, and our own Sam Mills, who's a published author, will come up away from the camera and read from his latest novel. So we were talking when we left last part a little bit about Sierra Writers. I want to give some time to the Young Writers Contest. Chuck, tell us about that, what that's about and why it's so important.
Well, it's our biggest sponsorship, and it's all about encouraging young writers, anybody 15 to 19 years old who goes to school in Nevada County or resides in Nevada County can submit a short story. Go to sierrawriters.org to find out the Young Writers Contest rules. And we give out cash prizes. It's an encouragement. We've had 11 years of really interesting and varied teen submissions.
Mm-hmm. Have some of these folks gone on to become writers, do you know?
I can only tell you that many of them are very serious about their writing and go on to take training to be writers in high school.
Right. You know, one of the things that has struck me about writing, talking about writing, people often ask, well, why do you like to write? And I say, I don't like to write. You know, it's a compulsion in a way. I mean, it happens to you. I don't think you really choose it. It chooses you. And it's very frustrating if you don't have an outlet, you know, an appreciation, a time for you to be able to develop your skills. So I'm really happy to see that we're pitching in and getting young writers involved.
Well, I hope that we'll get another good round of submissions. The deadline is not until April, but we're happy to receive them anytime starting in 2011.
We get a lot of involvement with the local English teachers, too. Many of them, both English classroom teachers and creative writing teachers, use this as an assignment.
Right.
Perhaps extra credit, but so it's a great teamwork with the schools.
Well, great. We'll talk a little bit more about that after we hear some reading. And Chuck, it's your turn to get to the big mic, and you're going to read from two works. Is that right? Or yes. So when you get over there, you can you'll set it up for us. What? We're technically challenged here. When you get a bunch of writers together, don't expect it to for the technology part to work. So, good to have you here, Chuck, reading again. Chuck actually was here for our telethon and did some really, really good reading for that show. We appreciate it.
So I'm going to start out reading from something I call Startlets. And from the preface, we all have stories in us. How many of these will never get written simply because the first few paragraphs were never put to paper? Startlets is my book of 96 little beginnings. That'll get you started. And even if you only find one of these stories that's a story that you want to write, well, you can write that story. Now, you might end up saying to yourself, if I'm going to write a story, I am not going to write anything that starts like that. Well, you can suit yourself, but until then, why don't you see if you enjoy any of these, and maybe you'll take on one of these to actually write your story. This is from the Western section. The snow fell. You wouldn't call it a blizzard, but it fell for days and days. The Atwell homestead was 5 miles from Sterndale, and Sterndale wasn't much. The Kudra spread was almost 3 miles further out. 3 miles past them, the Meekers struggled through their second winter. Everything was white, except the faintest sort of gray amidst the constant, windless fall of snow. Everything was white, except for one fool man riding their way. Pa, Cody Meeker said, turning his stare away from their small side window. That's a Western startlet. How about if we try a children's startlet? It was summer, After a thunderstorm, Timothy Griddles, age 6, grabbed the handle of the big front door with both hands and pulled on it until he heard it click. "Timothy," his mother had said, "make sure you hear the door click shut." And she had added, "And stay out of the puddles, honey." On the sidewalk, near the end of their fence, Timothy studied a puddle that was about as wide as he was tall. With a smile and a look around, he jumped into the middle of the puddle, which it turns out was at least 30 feet deep and clearer than any water he had ever been in. That's a startlet from the children's section. Now, the romance section. In all her ogled years, gorgeous Saja had never experienced anyone with body language as pathetic as Herbert's. When she first caught him gawking, he seemed to be apologizing for being on the same planet. Still half looking, Herbert dragged his head down with his hand and covered his eyes. Saja was smitten for the first time in her life. Here's one from the mystery and detective section. "Excuse me, sir." "Hey, this is a murder scene," replied a uniformed policeman. "Move behind the tape. In fact, don't be standing around here." "Excuse me, sir," Archibald Spann persisted. "I really think it would help if you found out something about why he was wearing those socks." Detective Lieutenant Royce Jiggs half turned from the bodies sprawled on the sidewalk, and before speaking turned back for a quick look at a dead man's socks. "Do you know this man? And what do you know about his socks?" I have a science fiction section.
Thank you.
The sun shone brightly, filtering through the waters off the continental shelf. The light blinked and settled into a liquid dusk over a bubble that kept 36 people alive. Sedge Fordham said goodbye to his wife and daughter and most of the other members of their mini environment. Carla Fordham handed her husband the briefcase containing their research. The look between them said they didn't know what the response to their findings would be. The American states, Europea, China, India, maintained 87 fully functional bubbles with a capacity for 1,000. Sedge was one of 25 delegates who attended the all-world conference in person from the hundreds of smaller bubbles around the globe. So that's just a sampling of startlets. If you want to write one of these stories, you might try emailing me at jaffe@startlets.com. But now I'd like to read a few of my haiku triples. This is a book of poetry that I have written with a form that I like. I sort of invented it by shoving groups of 3 haiku siblings together. So I'm going to do a little sampling of this, which is also broken up into sections. From the philosophical section, a set of triples. Factory outlets. Boundaries abound. We manufacture limits. They're all defective. Simple recipes for power. Anyone will do. Break this rule, break that rule, or break the golden rule. Human nature. Defying the odds, defying authority, crossing lines of can't. Now a haiku triple from my romance section. The title of all 3 is In Blended Passage of Slow Minutes and Fast Hours Before Tomorrow. The evening wore on, like sweaters in a warm house, assessing comfort. The evening wore on, tired, afterwardly tired, aching but flushed fresh. The evening wore on, like a thin layer of love, born to insulate. I have a section that's devoted to what I call heavy triplet. This one is called Sea Wheel. Treat me like normal. Treat me like life being lived, not life being leached. Normal is fiction. Every word has the cancer. True me, best you can. Tomorrow's today. Details bewilder anger. Shivers boil to calm. And I'll do one more from the nature section. This one is Songs from Dan's Garden. Slow it down a bit. Move dirt, pull weeds, plant seasons. Sit and think of you. My daughter turns teen. I must learn her changing tunes and practice my own. I've honed many songs, vibrant melodies, my life. I wonder, I sing. Actually, I'm going to read one more. This is the opener to the book. I guess you'd call it a preface triple. And that is, take a haiku. I set myself free. I tell me not to bug me. Just get out of here. Haikuku. Come to a still stand of forested melodies and sing the bird's song. High cool. Above the breezes, I vanish into thin air, whistling all that jazz. Chuck Chaffee, thank you.
Well, that was great. Thank you, Chuck. And, well, Chuck's repositioning himself. Babette, you know what I found interesting about that was with the startlets is that each of the startlet language and names and, the approach was so wrapped up in the kind of thing that is, that the science fiction is very different from the romance. And I know this is a fun, when I was teaching creative writing, I used to do a lot of these kinds of things with the kids. They loved them, to be able to try to write like somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I get a big kick out of writing short things. My whole group of writing seems to amount to writing lots and lots of short things, and this is something that other people can turn into long things.
Right. I have a playwriting methodology I use for my kids because they get hung up on, they hear about beginning, middle, end, and they never can get to the beginning because they don't know what the beginning's like. And I use a thing called add a scene, which is very much like what you do. We take it for wherever it is, wherever they have an epiphany or something that they like, and I will start them out with a scene, and then some of the group writes a couple scenes, scene before it, and some of them write a scene after it, and that multiplies out. And pretty soon everybody gets to write their own play, and they don't have to worry about whether that particular scene's near the middle or the beginning or the end. So it's a very good methodology.
I think that would work with fiction writing, too.
Mm-hmm. So what's next with Sierra Writers? What big projects other than the...
We have a workshop coming up in January with Sands Hall. We had such an interest. Originally it was going to be one half day, and now she's going to do 2 sessions, 2 half days, the same one, so that we can accommodate twice as many people.
Great. Look forward to that.
We do too.
So now we're going to ask our cameraman and crew extraordinaire, Sam Mills, to come up and take his spot in the writer's stool. And Sam was interviewed on the show a couple months ago when we got into some real depth. Sam writes wonderful young adult novels that I was really entranced by because they're based on mythology, and Sam actually builds mythologies within those texts. And so, Sam, you're going to read from a new piece?
I am. I'm going to read from a novel I finished about a year ago, and I'm still trying to get it published. It's called The Before Times, and it's an adult drama. And it takes place in ancient Rome. It's a part of a novel that travels. You have one soul in the first person singular who goes from the present life, current time, back to ancient Samaria in another lifetime, then to Rome, and then to the future, and then back to the present lifetime again. And you're always in the first person with the same soul, even though he's looking out at different windows. And in this one, I'm going to be reading from part 3, which takes place in Rome. And the main character whose voice you hear is Lucia, and she is married to Marcus, who is the contractor for the new Colosseum that's about to go up. And right now they're on the way to the emperor's palace for an intimate dinner with a few close friends. A sudden crash shatters the already boisterous street sounds and causes our litter to halt its forward progress. One of the carriers opens the curtain and reassures us that everything is fine. Apparently, a few roof tiles fell and smashed into fragments in front of us and are already being cleared away by the other bearers. I swear by the name of Jupiter, these streets are more dangerous than the battle plains of Britannia ever were, Marcus angrily mumbles as we wait for our progress to recommence. Why, only last week, one of our neighbors, I think I heard his name was Ulysses Sialis. He was an equestrian and a centurion in the Northern Legion. Anyway, he fought all over Gallia and Germania and had only just retired to Rome. He was recently killed a few blocks from here by a flower pot that fell from a second-story window. Marcus glared at me. Can you imagine that? He survives years of soldiering only to die so ingloriously on these very streets we traverse daily. My husband is right. The streets of Rome are hazardous, to say the least. They are crowded day and night, now that so much building is occurring all over town. Luckily for us, our destination is only a few blocks away, so we shouldn't be too late. Before long, our progress resumes, and we soon arrive there. The Imperial Palace stretches for blocks atop the Palatine, another of the 7 hills that constitute the center of our city. Begun by Augustus, who grew up there, the palace has been added to by each successive emperor and had recently reached a ridiculous level of grandiosity when Nero constructed his golden domus down in the valley below. As I stated already, Vespasian is currently in the process of dismantling acres of Nero's dream house and gardens to make way for the new Colosseum. Marcus and I exit our conveyance in a huge courtyard where several other empty litters rest on cobblestones nearby. Their respective crews mill around, talking quietly amongst themselves. 2 Praetorian guards, part of the emperor's private legion, wave us through the main entrance, having recognized us as frequent visitors and close friends of the emperor. We proceed through a series of public rooms, being guided by one of Vespasian's personal attendants who is waiting for us. We pass through one atrium after another, each surrounded by rows of columns and having fountains and a variety of statues, some of which were plundered during various campaigns abroad. We arrive at a doorway where 2 more guards are stationed on each side. They also let us through, and we walk into another smaller atrium that is part of Vespasian's temporary quarters. He is actually remodeling another part of the palace that will serve as his permanent apartment, but for now, he has chosen to stay in the oldest section of the vast complex where Augustus had once lived. It is surprisingly modest compared to the grandness of the public spaces we just trekked through to get here. We hear voices ahead and then turn to the corner and enter a spacious room where tonight's dinner party is being held. A few guests have already arrived, including our hosts, Vespasian and Sienus, who lounge together on a settee surrounded by an assortment of couches and pillows. He waves to us when he sees us approach. "Ah, Marcus and Lucia, come in, come in. Sienus and I are delighted you can join us this evening." Sienus smiles politely and nods her head in greeting. Vespasian is a solidly built man with a plain and honest face. He has a high forehead, and his steady eyes always seem to be considering something important. "I'm sorry we're late, Your Excellency. but we were delayed by some errant roof tiles that just managed to miss us, Marcus replies. I swear, I told Lucia I felt safer battling the Dumini in Britain. The emperor laughs at his friend's comment and then responds, I know what you mean, Marcus. Here in Rome, I have to beware of falling tiles as well as discontented citizens. Believe me when I say my guards can no more protect me from falling debris than they can from the complaints of injustice and corruption that bombard me from senators and plebes alike. I, too, miss the safety and order one finds on the field of battle. Another voice enters our conversation. Well, you have yourself to blame, Your Excellency, when it comes to venturing onto hazardous streets of the city. It belongs to Pliny the Elder, a friend and colleague to the emperor, who is well known as a man with many opinions on just about everything there is. He is slighter of build than his emperor and is handsome with an intelligent face. He is bearded and has curly hair that falls around his crown in some disarray. His eyes stare out from below a stern but contemplative brow. All of your various reconstruction projects, which quite frankly amaze me now that I have returned to Rome from Gallia, are partly responsible for the chaos. Just try and cross the Via Appia during the middle of the day. You're as likely to be run over by a wagon filled with blocks of marble as a cart filled with produce destined to the marketplace. Why, only yesterday evening, after the 10th hour, I witnessed an accident where several large jugs of beer dislodged from their cart and tumbled into the street, killing a hapless old beggar who couldn't scramble out of the way. Luckily for the merchant, the jugs stayed intact and didn't spill their contents on the busy thoroughfare. Imagine the chaos if that had happened. Pliny had just returned from an assignment as procurator to the southern coastal region of Gaul. He is a famous historian and writer as well as a soldier and accountant, and Marcus and I have known him for years, as they both had served together under Vespasian's command in the past. Lucia, please come and sit by me, Sienus asks as she offers me a seat next to her. She is elderly and has an air about her that suggests she's very astute and aware. I dutifully lay next to her while Marcus finds another spot on a separate couch on the other side of the emperor. The consort smiles at me and leans closer so she can better be heard. I like your pendant, my dear. The garnets are lovely. Thank you, my lady, I reply. Garnets glow with a deeper red than rubies and are so much more available. Your sapphire necklace is breathtaking, by the way, and must have cost you a small fortune. I think I'll end there. So we go on to have a rather lengthy dinner party at the Emperor's with a few more guests arriving and quite a bit of conversation.
What was the symbolic nature of the idea that all these predicaments, falling debris and stuff, happen in this city? What is that about?
This is what's happening is Rome has just been devastated by Nero, who bankrupted everything. And after what they call the Year of 4 Emperors, the army put Vespasian in charge. And now 2 years later, he's bringing order to what was a devastated town. And there's new construction projects going on all over the place. But as a consequence, the streets have become overcrowded and hugely dangerous, and it was not uncommon for people to be smashed to pieces by falling debris coming off the roofs. This is actually historic information.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much, Sam, for coming on and reading for us again. Appreciate
My pleasure.
Thank you. So we have a couple minutes left to talk about. Let's go back to Sierra Riders. We do have some shots for folks in terms of how to get in touch with people at Sierra Riders, do we not? So let's recap. How often are the meetings and readings and presentations?
We have monthly meetings on the second Wednesday of every month, with the exception of July and August. In December, we have a members-only party. All other meetings are either a speaker, a guest speaker, what we call an open read, or when we honor our young writers and the winners of the contest are announced, receive their prizes, their awards, and they read their stories.
And are there resources in this county that writers who may not be feeling up to the task, I mean, who are beginners, I mean, is there places like the Sierra have classes? Or,
Well, I'm not sure I can comment on classes. There are workshops and various people, many of whom are members of Sierra Writers, who give workshops. And one of the impressive things to me about the organization is that the range of writers and the ability to plug into somebody who is as new as you, or as occasionally published as you, or as accomplished as you, there are these opportunities, whether you're in a critique group, or you're in one of these open read opportunities, or you're just talking with each other around a speaker session.
Great. Well, that's about all we have time for tonight. Thank you so much for being here, Babette and Chuck. And I want to thank my wonderful crew, and Gail and Harley and everyone. We're going to go out tonight in memory of our late departed engineer, Bill Carquist. And that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye.